Think about the first time that you fell in love with photography. For me, it was seeing my first black and white photographs emerge from the watery birthing pool as I saw that print develop in front of my eyes. And that's when I also fell in love with black and white photography. And there's a special ability that black and white has that we're going to look at today, which once you understand how to kind of use it, is going to add a whole nother layer of interest and intrigue into your black and white photographs. And we're going to be using Scott Olson and his awesome book, Fargo Street, as an example. How's it? So it is Black and White Photography Month in the TPE Triad. There's info in the description box below, and we're going to be looking at black and white photography in all of its facets and forms. But there's one aspect to black and white photography that I wanted to focus on today, and I'm indebted to Scott for sending me this book, because in here is some wonderful illustrations of the power of shadows in black and white, or more specifically, the power of emptiness, because the two are not the same thing. So when I got started in photography, especially in black and white, I was obsessed about having detail in the shadows, making sure that everybody could see what was going on, but I was missing a trick. Because when you start to embrace shadows and use shadows like Scott has in this book, then it takes your photographs to a whole nother level. It creates something completely unique, which is what I think one of the great aspects of black and white photography is, the ability to show us the world in a way that is unusual to us, because obviously we see it in color. But before we jump into those shadows, I just want to give you an overview of this book. So Scott sent this through, and I believe it's Frame's first self-published book. So congratulations on that one. And it's an interesting mix. There's some street photography, some portraits of people. There's some very artistic and lovely looking images here. There's a bit of sports action. All these interesting photographs, but the ones that stand out for me the most are the ones where Scott embraces shadow. Look at this wonderful silhouette of people working on a roof somewhere, mid-throw, whatever it is that they're doing. And it could be a sculpture. It could be maybe like little kids up on the roof. You don't know. And that's the power of that shadow. Scott's exposed this so the roof and the people on the roof have gone into a complete silhouette. We get an idea, because our minds can go, okay, well, that's a person. We recognize that. We recognize the roof. But what's actually in there, what's represented by that shape, is left to our imagination. And I absolutely adore that approach. And I see it through a lot of Scott's images throughout this book, that there are photographs where empty space, negative space, black space just fills the frame. I've been struggling to put into words about how that makes me feel, but I think I've got a bit of a handle on it. And what it is, especially with the images of the petrol stations or the gas stations for you guys in the colonies, is that when you let all those shadows go black, the sky go black, obviously you're photographing at night, so the lights are on, you let that sky go black, you let the fog go, you let everything else go black. It's almost like these are little models, they're dioramas of a real thing. I love that approach. I think they're so cool. Now in color, I don't think they would work quite as well. I appreciate that you might get some funky, cool colors, but there's always going to be color around. Nighttime shadows have color in it. What we really need is to have that isolation, that darkness. That's what I love. I love this. I wish I'd had I was about to say guts there, but guts is a very strong word to talk about when using in photography, especially like black and white photography. You know, it's not like being in a war zone. I wish I'd had the courage of my convictions to take inky, black, very contrasty photographs when I was younger. I do now. I've learnt this is okay to embrace those blacks, to end up having these very graphic, very strong images that I adore. And of course, there's that bias coming back. Obviously, I'm going to look at Scott's work and be drawn to that type of photography. So we've got the solid blacks that are pulling all the detail out and just giving us that little diorama of a snapshot of nighttime life, which I adore. But then Scott also has this thing where he's really good at finding natural little frames. And this photograph here of a mailbox completely covered in a snowdrift, I love this. I think this is so cool. Not just because it's like it's a bizarre thing, and I've never seen this. Obviously, I don't live in the Midwest. If we get half a centimetre of snow here, the whole country shuts down. So I can't imagine what would happen if a post box got snowed in. Look at this, it's beautiful. But I think it also in colour, this would be a totally different photograph, because it feels like the mailbox has a something like might be a blue, something like that. The snow's kind of spindrift onto it. So it would just be, there's like this blue, and it would be all about just the post box. It would just be that. But then when it's black and white, it feels like this is a more of an organic thing. I really love this. And that's one of the aspects of, I think, with black and white photography. Yes, color is going to bring in its own emotions and stuff like that. But at the same time, if we get rid of that color, it means that all the elements in the image, like the deer that we looked at earlier, can coexist. There's two photographs posted on the TP Tribe recently, which I think illustrate this point beautifully. I've got Chris's images up here. He's trying to do some Alexei Titarenko kind of long exposure thing. And in the black and white one, you can see all the figures moving around and stuff. And then finally you find one figure that is static. But in the color version, all you see is this red hoodie in the visual. And that's what your eye is drawn towards. The subtle thing, that Easter egg off on the side of that person who is static, gets lost. And that's one of the things that I enjoy when I'm looking at Scott's work. There are so many images where it could be really, really, really busy in a color sense, but then when it's black and white, it becomes an image I feel comfortable sort of just exploring at my own pace, as opposed to being dragged around by my eyes. I've been waxing lyrical about shadows, which I love. But how are we going to put this into practice if you wanted to try your own version of doing this? All right, so we've got a couple of aspects here to think about to begin with. First of all, a lot of Scott's photographs that really lean into this idea of a very inky black, they're taken at night. Okay, so that's going to make our lives a lot simpler, isn't it? To take a picture at night. I mean, half the job's already done. But then it's thinking about, all right, how are you going to expose for this image? Now, the way that you get an exposure is going to be completely up to you. Right? I can give you some guidelines, but of course we all photograph in different ways. We all want to approach things in a different sense of what we actually want. But if we're looking for deep shadows, I would suggest that you start finding not the brightest part of the frame, because if you expose to the brightest part of the frame, you're going to lose a lot of the mid-tones and everything like that. This is not quite that approach. In my experience, what is best for me is to expose for something that's kind of in the middle of the road sort of thing in terms of luminosity. So in this photograph here of the drug-wise food and drug, cash-wise liquor petrol station, probably the underside of the roof. Maybe the roof, and this is, I was talking about using a spot meter. Most of your cameras will probably have an ability to use that. Find that exposure, and of course, with the benefit of digital these days, you can sort of see where it is. Now, that photographs are going to be in color. Now this is where the extra trick comes in, is to think about it in black and white. Think about where that shadow is going to disappear. That photograph, and we see it again in the motel image, in the photograph of the subway underpass thing, the staircases. It's deciding where things are going to be dark. So you have that color photograph. You see, all right, okay, so this is kind of where I know where I think one thing's to be dark. Have I got some detail in there? Because we're not looking to expose everything out of the image. We do want something there so we can sort of tone it down. Find that exposure that works, that's got the detail where you need it. Then when it comes to processing. Now, once again, everybody's got their own different approaches, and there isn't like a one correct best way to do this. It's what works for you. But if it were me, I would be looking at the photograph and saying, right, I want it to be obviously black and white, so I was going to convert it into black and white to begin with. Then sit, probably work on some contrast, and begin to see that photograph come to life in the way that I want to, with those inky dark spaces. Playing with the exposure a little bit within Photoshop, Lightroom, where have you. Subtle. What I tend to like to do is to go actually quite majorly, also completely off the scale. So I might just pull the exposure down completely, and then bring it up until it feels like it's where I want it to be. Now I said subtle there. The point is that I want the image to look subtle in terms of like the approach, but to get that subtlety, I have to go to an extreme. So I've got my base for the subject itself. Now I want to think about the shadows. So I'd create a new layer, do a bit of burning in, and then take down those shadows where I want the inkiness to come through. One of the things that I like about a lot of Scott's inkiness at night is that he's photographing in the rain. I think that's an overlooked aspect of these photographs, is that the reflections, the wetness, it feels like liquid tar that's around these images, that's reflecting all the stuff through. And the discovery we want. We don't want to just yank down the shadows until they're just black. We want to work with them. We want to build up an expertise of crafting them so they feel organic. They feel like they are just this liquidy thing that's engulfing the object that we're photographing and presenting it as a one-off. I love that idea. That's why I look at Scott's work and I go, oh my God, that's amazing. So I hope some of this has given you confidence to go and experiment in your own black and white photography. As I said, it's Black and White Photography Month in the TP Tribe. If you're interested in joining us, link in the description box below. If you like that video, you'll probably love this one about black and white here, or there's one over here that YouTube will probably think that you like as well. Either way, choose one of them. Thanks ever so much for watching, and I will see you again soon.